Okay, I want to tell you a little story about our air, this thing around us, this invisible gas. We often don't think about air because usually we don't see it. We mostly see the effects, how the wind blows, the air moves and moves the branches of trees or sails or any flat surface will cut up, get a lot of push from the moving air around it. It's called wind. This invisible gas, we wouldn't survive without this surrounding invisible substance. Gases form not liquid but gases form of nitrogen and oxygen, something like 70-20 or 78-20% nitrogen, oxygen, and rest some argon and other gases. So the oxygen part is important. 70% or 78, how was it? Something like more than 70%, 78 maybe, I don't know. We don't really need that. So the 20%, so 1/5 about, something about 1/5 of this surrounding gas, that's what we need. The rest is like nitrogen. It's also important because it keeps the pressure high enough. So, and it protects us also, the nitrogen gas. Meteors and others, they feel the friction in nitrogen too, not only in oxygen, but the oxygen helps to burn the stuff. And nitrous oxides also form in the atmosphere because it's mostly nitrogen. We often forget that the oxygen is not the main part in this air. It's only about 20%. So 1/5. 4/5 is nitrogen, which we cannot actually use much. It only keeps our body pressurized and we don't feel the enormous vacuum of space and our eyes wouldn't pop out of our eye sockets, and so it keeps the atmosphere pressurized, the nitrogen. That's the most important thing, I think, of the nitrogen. But the oxygen, we need that to be able to live. Every child, every person on the planet should know this. It's obvious, maybe it's even too obvious, that we need oxygen because our cells would die. They couldn't function without oxygen. Brain cells, they die depending on temperature. Under 15 minutes, maybe under 10 minutes, our brain cells are getting to die without the blood bringing oxygen from our lungs to the cells in our body. So I can say that without this atmosphere and the 1/5 of oxygen there, we would have about 10 to 15 minutes to live, and even from that time we would be conscious under 5 minutes. So in under 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, we will lose our consciousness and we will lay down on the ground and slowly suffocate in our sleep. Under 15 minutes. So we are very dependent on this invisible substance called air. Without this air around us, which we can feel, if we flap our hands, we can feel, okay, there's something. If you have some kind of asthma or you have been smoking too long and your lungs doesn't work anymore, you can feel how hard that is for your body and for your heart. And sometimes it even leads to heart attack, very fast asthma or too many cigarettes and you cannot breathe anymore. So your heart will fail, because it's so hard to pump all the blood which has not enough oxygen. It's like pumping water in your veins. It doesn't do much good. So, or maybe some oil. You could pump oil in your veins. It doesn't do any good. You will die. So Under 15 minutes, 1/4 hour, and we all would die without this oxygen there in the air. And it's only one. You have 5 fingers, this thumb, and you are dead. Thumb up, you are alive. Well, you need these two. These are the nitrogen parts. 4/5, and this is the oxygen part. This we usually forget the thumb. We remember these 4 fingers, but we forget the fifth. This is the most important finger. This is the oxygen. And without this oxygen, you have only 15 minutes to live. And from that 15 minutes, 2/3, you would be unconscious, laying on the ground and trying to breathe. And there would be only maybe nitrogen to breathe, and it doesn't do any good. You would die. So we often forget how important this invisible air is to us. And what is wrong with many science fiction movies when they picture the world after some catastrophic event like burning all the fossil fuels and desertification, like the Dune or Mad Max? Where does the oxygen come if there is no oceans even? Half of the oxygen, even 70%, is ocean, and only 50% of the oxygen comes from the ocean. Even if oceans are much larger, about 20% larger in percent points, land is 30% and ocean is 70%. But half of the oxygen comes from the land, from that 30%, and half of the oxygen from that 70% of ocean comes. So 50-50 from ocean and land. Land, which is only 30%, produces 50% of the oxygen we need. And ocean, which is 70%, 7/10 of the surface area is ocean. It produces 50%, 5/10, half. Half from the 70%, half from the 30%. So land is more important in producing oxygen. Of course, the plants, the trees. And without those trees and plants, of course, and without the oceans, plankton producing oxygen, we would die under 15 minutes. So we often forget this. When we look science fiction, it's called science fiction for obvious reasons, because it doesn't mean to be even factual. It's fiction. It can be anything. And fiction is not reality. It's fantasy. It can be any. It's just stories. They don't have to be like Dune. Where does the planet of silicon, sand, where does the oxygen come from? Have it been there? Have it been enough for centuries or years? Or how long does it last? It has to come from somewhere. And oxygen on this planet, most of it, maybe some come from chemical processes, or maybe we people produce some, like in electrolysis, some oxygen. But most of the oxygen in the air has come from photosynthesis, and we still don't know how to do it ourselves, I believe. Maybe there was some breakthrough a few years ago that we can replicate the photosynthesis, but I haven't heard if it's not the mainstream, at least. I believe we haven't been able to. We have some, actually here in Finland, they were able to break water, HO2, into nitrogen, sodium, what is the vety? What is this? Hydrogen and oxygen part, only with light. But it's not the same as photosynthesis, because photosynthesis doesn't break the water into hydrogen and oxygen. Well, actually it does, but it also produces sugars and fibers, and well, mostly sugars in the process. So the food, not only the air they breathe, but the food is produced in the plants. So all our food actually comes from the plants. Animals eat plants and we eat animals, so we can think that all our energy and the means to burn the energy, oxygen, comes from the plants. Food is nothing without oxygen, because if we eat food but we have no oxygen, we cannot burn the food. Our body works burning fat and sugars mainly. Fat burning and sugar burning, and usually both come from the plants and animals who eat plants. It's just a middleman there, the animal which we kill and eat. So, and it's only 30% of the land surface which contributes 50%. So it's very important. And we very often forget it, I think, and we don't think about it much. What would happen without air? Or, more importantly, oxygen in the air? We would have only 15 minutes time to live. And even if there is a lot of oxygen in the atmosphere, the balance is there. The plants and the seas, the plankton in the seas and all the photosynthesis in all the organisms, they accumulate the oxygen to this 20%. And we, land animals, and even the plants themselves, they don't do it for nothing. The plants doesn't give us the oxygen. They do it for themselves because they need it during the night when there's no sun, or during dark times, or any other winter or whatever, when there is not enough sunlight to produce oxygen. It's for the trees and for those. Maybe planktons doesn't really use the oxygen, I don't know. In the early age of the earth, oxygen was poisonous for those early bacteria. It was poisonous, the oxygen. But later they evolved to use the oxygen in energy production, burning sugars and fat with oxygen into energy. And life is energy. Without energy there is no life. Everyone knows this. So I even believe that life is just a form of energy. It's just kind of it's a symptom. I can argue that life is a symptom of energy. It's just life is just emerging from the flow of energy. How the energy behaves, it has produced life. That's obvious, because we are here. We are the proof that life is. We don't really understand life, but it is. So we can argue that it is. So it's very important to understand this invisible. We can feel it if you flap it, and you know when the air is really low in oxygen in the closed room or in elevator. People have suffocated in elevators when there's a lot of people in the same elevator and it's stuck and the air doesn't flow. They will find dead bodies in the elevator because they have suffocated there. It shouldn't happen, and usually it doesn't happen. But or if you are trapped in the closed room, there is enough tightness so that the air cannot change, you will die in the closed room. So, or you can demonstrate it by putting a plastic bag in your bag, and many children have died like this. That's why there's warnings in the plastic bags that children shouldn't play with them, because they might put the plastic bag over their head and they will just die inside the plastic bag. So because after you lose consciousness, you cannot do anything, and it might take 15 minutes or 10 minutes to kill you, but you will lose consciousness in 3 to 5 minutes, and then you can only hope that someone finds you and can save you. But anyway, so it's very important, and we don't think this invisible air which is all around us, we don't think enough about air. It's after food, after sugars and fats, it's the most important thing, because we don't do anything with sugars or fats without oxygen. We cannot use it. We live because oxygen combines with the sugar molecules and releases the CO2 and water from the hydrogen, and or with the fat, maybe mostly, I don't know what fat is. It's like hydrocarbons also. This fatty is hydrocarbons, and when we burn it anaerobic, we can actually burn it anaerobic, yes. But even then, that's interesting. Ketos, burning fat anaerobically. Well, we have some kind of possibility to, but it will produce some toxins in our body, lactose acids or something in our muscles. It's not very good to burn fats without oxygen. It will produce toxins in our body. We need the air, I mean the oxygen, to burn those away. And so I think when the brains are mostly fat, little oxygen will make our brain work very poorly, because there will become some kind of anaerobic processes, maybe, and some toxins, and they will interfere with the brain function. So the fresh air helps to clean the blood, and after going outside and getting some fresh air, you can think again much easier. Everyone have noticed this, that it's much easier to think when you have fresh air around you with a lot of oxygen. Our brains function better in high oxygen environment. So actually there's maybe also burning fat makes them, well, it's a kind of controversial, not very controversial, but I don't know enough about that now. But we can also burn fat without oxygen, I believe. Or was it oxygen? No. Well, anyway. Or maybe it was just burning fat with oxygen. I don't know. Because we need air, of course. Otherwise, we could be living without oxygen. I think we also burn the fat with oxygen. Yeah, it's, I don't know, another subject. But anyway, we need the oxygen to live. And we don't pay enough attention to things we don't see, like the air, this air. Only when we have hard time to breathe, or we see smoke in the air, or we smell something in the air, or if we have asthma or some breathing difficulties, then we notice. Or when there's some high winds or storms, then we notice the air. But usually we forget how important it is. It is life. Every time you breathe, you understand that this invisible gas is life. And those who produce it by photosynthesis, planktons and plants, without them, there would be no life for us who breathe. We don't make any photosynthesis in our bodies, so we are fully dependent on plants and planktons and all the other oxygen producing organisms. And they don't do it for us as a gift, they do it for themselves. They also used oxygen, and you can understand what happens when there's too little oxygen in the air. And also the plants will use the oxygen during the night. There might come some times when the night is the last night for larger animals, when there is not enough oxygen for everyone. Yeah. Ah, I have an alarm. I have to go to. Yeah. So remember this every time you breathe. How important the plants are. How important the oceans are. 30% land, 50% oxygen. 70% ocean, 50% oxygen. Without the air you breathe, and without the oxygen in the air you breathe, you would have only maybe 3 minutes to be aware and maximum of 15 minutes to live. So every time you breathe, think about it. What you are doing to yourself and the planet. Every time you breathe. My lungs are bad. I have smoked too long in my years in life. I will die sooner than others who have better lungs when the oxygen gets to diminish in the air. I will probably die in a heart attack or something like that. The dinosaurs, I forgot to tell you that the dinosaurs, they suffocated. Just like Jesus, if he was real, he suffocated on the cross because he was hanging from the arms and he just couldn't breathe anymore. It was so heavy, so I believe his heart failed. He was so weak already, and hanging from your arms on the cross, it's so heavy for your lungs that Jesus suffocated, or probably his heart failed. Heart attack, suffocation and heart attack. It's like having bad asthma or very bad lung disease. You cannot breathe anymore, and then your heart just gives up and you die. So we should really appreciate this invisible thing, the air, nitrogen, and oxygen. Mostly the oxygen. The nitrogen is also important for the pressure, as I said. But we should think about things we don't usually see more often or doesn't feel. Move your hands, move your body, run or do something. You can feel the air around you, so you don't forget what you don't see. So I hope life can keep seeing, but often I'm not very optimistic because we forget the things we don't see or feel. Only when it's too late, like in the storm of fire, we remember the things we don't see. So try to remember every time you breathe that there's a lot of important things which literally gives you life. Trees really doesn't gift it, the oxygen to us. They use it themselves too when there is not photosynthesis going on. Trees doesn't do it for love for us, they do it for themselves. We should love the trees because without them we would die. So keep reminding yourself every time you take a deep breath or not so deep breath what you are really dependent on. You are not really dependent on so much about material things or even food, because food is useless without oxygen to burn it. So Try to remember what is important in life every time you breathe. So, non-alcoholic beer is very good. Drinking water is another subject, but water, air, sugars, fibers, fats, all comes from the sun, the energy into plants and planktons, photosynthesis. We haven't mastered that skill yet, so we truly depend on plants. Who can do it? We cannot. Try to remember of what you are really dependent on. You are not dependent on money or wealth or success or any material things other than this matter called air to breathe, food to eat, water to drink, light to see and keep you warm. Not too warm, but comfortably warm. Every time you breathe, think what really matters and what's really important to your life, what keeps you alive. When you breathe, just try to feel and think what keeps you alive. Without air, less than 15 minutes. Without water, less than a week. Without food, maybe a month. So, try to put things in priority in life. And the most important thing in this list was the invisible, which we forget very often. This stuff. Air. That's the most important thing. Remember that every time you breathe.